The Trump administration just officially made it much harder for lawyers who dedicate the early part of their career to public service to qualify for loan forgiveness under a program that has been around for a very long time that many lawyers rely on in order to be able to afford becoming lawyers and going to law school. It's a program called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and Trump just gutted it by politicizing what type of employment qualifies as a public interest firm or organization or company. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. This is another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network, where we talk about the intersection of law and politics. And I think this is a very important issue, because it affects so many people that I knew in law school and so many good, hardworking lawyers. We're going to unpack this issue. We're going to unpack Trump's decision. Brian, where do you think we should start here today?
Well, I want to start by setting the table and explaining that, probably since the beginning of this century, the price of law school has gone up dramatically from when I was in law school many years ago. And now today, it's certainly in excess of $70,000 if you're paying full tuition. There's very little discounts if you're attending a state school or a funded school. So as a result of that, many law students revert to some kind of loans. I would say that the vast majority of law students today get some kind of a loan. Now, people listening to this might go, well, we don't need more lawyers. Yes, we do. And as a matter of fact, if nothing else, you kind of take away from some of these videos that Shant and I do is why it's important that there be a rule of law. During Trump's administration, law schools called it the Trump bump, because so many more people were applying to become lawyers because they were outraged at what was going on. That certainly has happened again.
Yep.
So kids come out of school today, and they're not kids, by the way. By the time they graduate law school, they're usually in their mid to late 20s. To get their first job, sometimes they have more than $200,000 in loan debt. And as a result of that, Shant is going to explain this program, the origin of this program, and why it's significant.
Well, let me start out by pointing out a couple of things. This is kind of anecdotal, but it's my own personal experience. I don't think I know anyone that I went to law school with, which was over a decade ago now, that did not take out student loans. I know even a few folks on scholarships, they had to even take out loans. I don't think I know anyone that's ever worked at our firm that started after I was around that didn't have student loans at some point in their career. So, and I can't imagine, I can only assume it's probably gotten worse and it's gotten more expensive. So loans are a critical part. And I also think that, yes, Brian, I agree. Lawyers are a critical component of safeguarding against these threats to democracy that we face now under the MAGA regime. So what the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program provided was the ability for folks who want to go into public service, and we'll talk about the definition of it because that's the crux of all of this right now. It allowed them to go work at these places that typically paid significantly less than the private sector, work there for 10 years, all while making loans based on income, but still making loan payments for 10 years, 120 qualifying monthly payments. If they did that for 10 years, they spent time working at an organization like this that qualifies as a public service type of employer. Their loans would be forgiven with no tax consequence. I thought it was an excellent program. I personally know many people that did this. I personally knew people that were very passionate about criminal law or environmental law or public education law or child welfare law that went into organizations where they would get paid much less than other private sector jobs, much less than other jobs they could have probably gotten without even a law degree. But they did it because they know that they provided some good to society. They were a valuable piece that contributed to society. And they did it for 10 years. And they still made income-based, income-driven repayments on their loans. And then they got their loan forgiven. Not many of these people, I don't want to say none, I don't want to talk in absolutes, but many of these people would not take those jobs. And those jobs would have a lot less qualified lawyers working in them had it not been for these programs. So what now the Trump administration is doing, let me talk about what's a qualifying employer or what was a qualifying employer, was any government organization. So it could be at federal, state, local level, any government organization that you worked at. It could be a DA's office, public defender, other things like that. A 501c3 tax exempt nonprofit organization they worked at, that would qualify as well. And some other nonprofit organizations that aren't necessarily 501c3s, like ones that provide childhood education, public health, law enforcement, I don't know, the library, things like that, organizations like that. Now, what the Trump administration has done is they've tried to redefine what a qualifying employer is. And they've basically politicized that. So, Brian, maybe you can talk about what they're trying to do with what qualifies as one of these nonprofit or public service type of organizations.
Yeah, and Sean, I want to point out also that we're not that these aren't exclusive to law school, but we're talking specifically about law school today. And I want to point out one other thing too, which is it may be one of the reasons why people go to law school in the first place. So in some respects, this may be like a taking, you're taking something away from people. So let's assume that your goal in life was to go to law school and work for the ACLU. That's the only reason you went to law school. And now you find out that these $200,000 in loans you took out with the expectation that 10 years after you graduate law school, working for the ACLU will pay it off. You're affected by two things. And I'm going to talk specifically about how the administration is doing this in a moment, but I just want to point this out. Is that first of all, you may have decided not to go to law school in the first place if you found this out. I'm not going to get myself $200,000 in debt only to have the pulled out from underneath me. The other is you may have very well given up valuable for-profit employment before. Right. But what ultimately the Trump administration is doing with this is that they are getting people to stop working for organizations which does not support a Trump agenda. So what they're trying to do is they're trying, like so many things, they try to put lipstick on a pig, right? And what they try to say is like, for example, if you're engaged in anything to do with illegal immigration, you're going to lose your loan. Well, okay, but unfortunately, that would mean that the lawyer who's representing people who are seeking asylum is now engaged in illegal activity and is going to lose their loan. And just some of the examples are Planned Parenthood, lawyers who work for Planned Parenthood, Catholic Charities. You could have decided to go work for a number of Catholic charities. Campus DEI offices, you're working for a school or a university, and then criminal defense work, potentially even criminal defense work where you happen to represent somebody who's charged with protest. You could lose your loans there. Yeah. So this is a very sneaky way of trying to shut up your opposition, which is what it does, Shant.
It really just changes the game. It changes the rules in the middle of the game. And not to call it a game, because this isn't a political thing. These are good organizations and these are good people that want to be lawyers and good lawyers and work in places that do good work. And it really changes the rules on them. And it's not fair. So what happened recently is on October 30th, the Department of Education that Trump's trying to gut anyway, issued a rule, finalized a rule revising the eligibility for what qualifies as one of these organizations that can qualify for PSLF. And what they did is they said that certain employers will not qualify as a qualifying employer if they are found to engage in activities that have I have to read this because it's incredible, a quote, substantial illegal purpose. And illegal purpose, by the way, is aiding illegal immigration, providing gender affirming healthcare for minors in certain states, and supporting terrorism. And they don't go further about what each one of these means. So it gives them full discretion to go around and say, we don't like this organization. So I agree, Brian, this is just rulemaking, kind of to discourage, or not even discourage, but to prevent folks from dedicating their early part of their career, especially to organizations that might do things that harm Trump. And coincidentally, a lot of those things happen to be pro-democracy organizations that were traditionally thought of as nonpartisan. Nonpartisan organizations that Trump disagrees with, however. So this is a way.
Illustrations in my mind of how far this goes are outrageous. So if somebody was accused, for example, of being an Al-Qaeda agent. Okay, so we're not talking about that person having a student loan. We're talking about the lawyer who's representing that person. One of the things I have always seen on the far right is it's the theory that the the most despicable people, the damned, the people who are, awful people who've done terrible things in our society shouldn't be represented by lawyers. And the problem is, once you do that, where do you draw the line? It isn't that anyone's saying that, the hypothetical mass murderer should immediately be executed. We're just saying they deserve representation.
Right,
but according
because that's a basic tenet of democracy, of our system. Innocent till proven guilty.
The Sixth Amendment, right?
Yeah.
The right to counsel, all those kind of things. It's just, it's when you look at this, you go, how far are they absolutely going to go with this? And the other thing about this too, Sean, is this is one of those stories that I think flies below the radar. Obviously, my generation, we either don't have loans or you went to school very late in life and you might have a loan. But this must be something that your generation has some knowledge of, or is this also been flying below the radar for your generation?
I don't know if it's flying below the radar. And you're right, Brian. When we first talked about this, off video or off camera, when I said this is something
we actually
important,
do prepare folks before we come on. We actually prepare.
Yeah, despite what the final product looks like, we actually talk and prepare, and we don't hate each other. But no, when we first talked about this, you kind of weren't familiar with this program because it wasn't a critical component of young lawyers starting their career in your time when you went to law school, in the 1950s. No, I'm kidding. But even more recently, when you went to law school in the 80s, it wasn't a critical component. But for me, I think you grab any lawyer of my generation and they would know exactly what this is. They would know exactly what this program is. And a lot of people started their careers and became who they are because of programs like this. And this just guts it, and it's an important issue, even if it flies under the radar. It's an important issue because, there's the Shakespeare line about first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. That is literally what Trump's trying to do. I mean, that was like a 15th century tyrant type of thing to do, but Trump's trying to do that now because he knows that these organizations, along with the judiciary, along with the court system, are the bedrock of the effort to stop his attempt at demolishing democracy and just becoming a true authoritarian. So
well said, Sean. I don't have anything I can add to that. I think, and we could go on with this topic forever because it's about law school and about, making new good lawyers, which we all need. So that's my last
we do need that. They're the modern sort of superheroes in this fight for democracy, I think. And I hope, I don't know, but I suspect it will, but I certainly hope it'll get challenged and this rule will get struck down and this nonsense will get shut down. So I still have hope in our system. And guess what? It's going to be lawyers again that are carrying the torch for that fight. So we'll keep you posted on this. Let's see if something happens. And if it does, we'll keep you posted. Thanks for tuning in to another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. If you like this content, remember to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.